Prologue. They say you remember the exact second your life splits in two, before and after. For me, it wasn't the day I caught my wife cheating. It was the night I poured the wine, straightened the napkins, and laid the divorce papers between the candles like a final course. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why. I already knew. The only question left was how much of me I could salvage from the wreck, and how much of her carefully curated world I would take when I walked away. Chapter 1. What looked like a perfect marriage. On paper, we were enviable. A brick town home with a blue door and climbing ivy, 2 salaries that made the neighbors nod politely at HOA meetings, and a calendar full of dinners we were both too tired to enjoy. I was an operations director at a logistics firm. Olivia, Liv to everyone but me, was a senior buyer for a luxury brand. She had a gift for taste. She chose the restaurants, the paint colors, the bottles of wine, her words. She had chosen me once. The cracks were microscopic at first. A new passcode on her phone because of work, late gym sessions that stretched past 10, a laugh that lived in the device pressed to her ear rather than in our kitchen. I told myself it was the season, the deadlines, the simple fatigue that comes from grinding through your 30s. Then the lies began to rhyme. On a gray Tuesday that smelled like rain but refused to deliver it, my assistant misrouted a shipping confirmation to my inbox. The sender was a boutique hotel midtown, 2 nights, King Suite, Thursday to Saturday. The reservation name, Miss Olivia Carrington. The card on file, mine. The special request section read, "Please have the Riesling chilled. He likes it cold." I sat with the email for a long minute, stunned by the pettiness of that pronoun. He, not we, not my husband, a gendered ghost smirking in a form field. I forwarded nothing. I said nothing. I closed my office door and stared at the skyline until it blurred. When the shaking in my hand stopped, I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at the man in the mirror. He was tired, but not broken. He was hurt, but not helpless. On Thursday, I didn't go to the hotel. I didn't follow her. I drove home, fed the cat, and took a slower revenge. I opened a spreadsheet. Chapter 2. The Ledger. It's easy to call it cold when you're not the one being burned. I called it focus. I listed what we owned together, what we pretended to own together, and what she quietly moved into shadows. A joint account drained in careful drips into a new checking account with a bank we didn't use. A leased car she said was a perk, but that I found my name on as a guarantor. A credit card I'd never seen, with a balance that blinked like a warning light. I moved to the second tab. Time. Most affairs, I'd read once in an HR training module no one listened to, are patterns disguised as chaos. I mapped her new gym nights, her supplier dinners, the trips that appeared on our shared calendar as color-coded blocks and nothing else. Patterns emerged, and with them an absence shaped like a man. Hiring a private investigator felt dramatic until I did it. Grace Armitage arrived at the cafe in a slate blazer and a posture that suggested she sat down only when she absolutely had to. She took notes while I talked, asked questions I didn't want to answer, and didn't flinch when I said I wasn't sure if I wanted to save my marriage. "What do you want?" she asked. I said, "Leverage," before I could stop myself. She nodded, not approving, not judging. "You'll have it." The photos arrived in a sealed envelope a week later. Hotel lobbies, A dim restaurant corner, a park bench where hands lingered too long. Liv's smile turned private, then intimate, then absent in that sleep-drunk way people only let themselves be when they think no one is watching. The man was older than me, softer, the kind of handsome that curdles if you look at it too long. His name, Grace told me, was Marcus Lane, a regional VP for a supplier Liv had started courting last quarter.
Chapter 3. The Third Ring. The anniversary snuck up like birthdays do when you're not counting. 10 years. The tin anniversary which felt like a cruel joke, metal that looks like silver until you touch it. Liv booked the restaurant a month in advance, a place with white tablecloths, and a sommelier who spoke in filial tones about grapes. She chose the dress 3 weeks out, emerald green, sharp at the shoulder, featuring a back she knew I'd notice. For the card, she picked one with embossed leaves and wrote a neat, practiced hand, "To a decade of building, of choosing each other, of knowing the right thing even when it's hard." I bought nothing. I made something instead, an evening that would hold 2 truths at once, her version and mine, and end with the one that mattered to me. 2 days before the dinner, I sat with Grace in the back of my car outside a glass box of an office building. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm not sure of anything," I said, "but this is the only language she understands. Presentation." Grace handed me the last piece, a slim black folder labeled with our initials. Inside were copies, bank transfers into Marcus's LLC disguised as consulting, a memo from Liv's work email authorizing expedited vendor approvals without committee review, and photos time-stamped to coincide with purchase orders that had drifted. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was compromising her company. That mattered for reasons beyond moral outrage. It mattered for outcomes. "You could take this to her boss," Grace said. "I could," I said, and she heard the rest. "But I won't. Not yet." I hired a maitre d' for a night. Cash, quiet. I booked the private back room and told him that when my wife stood, he would dim the lights for exactly 3 seconds, then raise them. He didn't ask why. He had the eyes of a man who'd seen worse than 2 people ruining a marriage over duck confit. The papers came together with the satisfaction of a dovetail joint. The divorce filing ready to serve, the proposed settlement already signed by my lawyer, the list of accounts frozen at 5 p.m. that day. I moved money I was allowed to move, secured assets I could secure, and collected the keys to storage units I didn't want to think about. On the morning of our anniversary, Liv kissed me with a softness I had missed. "7 tonight?" she asked. "7." I said, and went to work. At 6:45, I stood at the entrance to the restaurant in a suit that fit like a decision. Liv arrived at 6:52, perfect and late, her hair in an architectural sweep. She greeted the hostess by name. She greeted me like we were being watched, which we were, by a world she never stopped performing for. "You look," I began, and finished. "Expensive." She laughed, low, the way she laughed only when she wanted something. "Wait until dessert." The maitre d' led us to the back room. The candles were already lit. The table gleamed. Liv's eyes shone in the candlelight. "It's beautiful," she said, and for a moment the old warmth flared in me. How easily she could make a room feel like the answer to a question you hadn't known to ask. I poured the wine. We toasted to 10 years. We let the first course arrive and be admired. and then before the main, I slid the black folder onto the table and laid the divorce papers beside it, centered between the plates. Liv's face was a study of micro-expressions: confusion, recognition, contempt, calculation. Then came the thing I had always underestimated: the speed. She lifted the top page, skimmed, set it down, and smoothed the tablecloth with her free hand as if nothing had wrinkled. "What are you doing, Nathan?" she asked mildly, the voice she used with vendors who tried to overcharge. "I'm ending a story and starting an accurate one." Her eyes flicked to the door, to the candles, to the corners of the room where I had placed no obvious witnesses. "This is vulgar." "This is proof," I tapped the folder. "And this is mercy. I don't want your job. I don't want to scorch the earth unless you make me. Sign the settlement, walk out with your head up, or don't, and I serve this tomorrow morning to your GC, your CFO, and the board chair who never liked you." The lights dimmed for 3 seconds, then came back up. The maitre d' had done his part. Liv's pupils widened, not at the change, but at the implication. We were on a stage. She didn't reach for the pen. She lifted her glass. "You rehearsed this." "I prepared for it. There's a difference." "And what does your preparation get you besides the thrill of humiliating me?" "Humiliation is what you felt when you started lying. This is consequence." She considered me like I was a new vendor she might need, might destroy. "You won't go through with it," she said gently. "You want me to do the reasonable thing. I always do the reasonable thing." "You always do the expedient thing," I corrected. "Tonight, they're the same." The second course arrived. The server withdrew. The room hummed with the sound of air through vents. Liv set down her glass and smiled the smile that had gotten us cables, upgrades, forgiven bills. "And if I don't?" she asked. "Then we go to Act 2, and you'll hate the genre."
Chapter 4, Act 2. She didn't sign. Of course she didn't. Liv didn't lose. She deferred. She stood, smoothing her dress. "I'm going to the restroom," she said, tone bright with the artificial light of civility. I let her go. The maitre d' texted, "She's on the phone." I replied, "Let her be," and went to work. Grace had a phrase for it: gentle pressure, relentlessly applied. While Liv occupied herself with triage, I emailed a sanitized version of the folder to her personal account, just enough to make the risk legible, not enough to start a war. I forwarded a copy to a private address her CEO used for scheduling, subject line, "Vendor concern, confidential, for review only." I CC'd no one. I hit send at 7:59 p.m., the exact minute our reservation turned to the hour. Liv returned radiant and brittle. "I won't be bullied," she said, lightly, taking her seat. I slid the pen toward her. "Then be persuaded." She scanned the settlement: clean division, equitable split, a graceful exit that preserved her job if she kept her mouth shut about the affair and the memo. It was, objectively, generous. It was also non-negotiable. Her hand stilled. "You're serious?" "I'm tired," I said, and the honesty surprised us both. "I'm tired of arguing with a wall I helped paint." She closed her eyes for a beat. When she opened them, they were glassy but clear. "What if I told you it wasn't what you think?" "I'd say then you should have thought harder about what you did." A muscle in her jaw twitched. She signed. The relief that followed wasn't triumph. It was a chair I hadn't known I was carrying, set down. I exhaled. We ate a few quiet bites. The server asked if we wanted dessert. I looked at Liv. "No," she said, and smiled in a way that gave nothing. "I think we're finished." At the door, she paused. "You'll regret this," she said, conversationally. "I'll regret many things. This won't make the top 10. She left without looking back. 10 minutes later, Grace texted. She called him. "He's rattled. Also, check your personal email." I did. A reply from the CEO's private address. 2 words. "We'll talk." I wasn't proud of the satisfaction that bloomed in me. I also didn't hate it. Chapter 5. Fallout. The next week played like a second act written by different hands. Liv moved into a serviced apartment downtown with a view she could weaponize on Instagram. Marcus vanished into a sabbatical that coincided with his company's internal audit. I kept my head down at work and pretended I didn't hear the whispers, because there were whispers. There always are when the beautiful couple in the blue-doored townhome becomes 2 single tax filings. Grace closed her file and sent an invoice I paid without looking at the total. She said, "You did well." I said, "I feel like I burned down a house to kill a mosquito." She said, "You killed mold. The house was already rotting." At night, I walked the rooms and let the quiet be loud. I stopped checking Liv's socials. I stopped waiting for her key in the lock. A strange thing happened in the space where anger had been living rent-free. I missed her. Not the woman she had become by the end, sharp, tired, hungry for applause, but the one who had held my hand through cheap apartments and cheaper dinners. Missing wasn't permission to return, it was an accurate accounting. 2 weeks after the dinner, I sat in a glass conference room across from Liv, her company's general counsel, and a third person, a woman in a navy suit with a posture that suggested she spent her days not losing. The GC thanked me for bringing the vendor issue to their attention in a way that made it clear I had done something between noble and necessary. The woman in the suit asked concise questions. Liv stared at a point beyond my left shoulder like there was a future there only she could see. When it was done, the GC said the phrase everyone reaches for when the blood is already on the floor. "We appreciate your discretion." "I appreciate my privacy," I said. In the elevator, Liv finally looked at me. "Happy?" "No," I said. "Just done." Her mouth tightened. "They'll keep me," she said. "I hope they do," I said, and meant it. Losing a marriage and a career in 1 month is an injury some people don't recover from. I wanted consequence, not ruin. She stepped closer, voice low. "You think this ends it?" "I think it ends us, and that's enough." She shook her head, a tiny movement that read as pity. "You never understood the gain." "Maybe not, but I know how to stop playing." Chapter 6. The Empty Sundays. Grief is boring, mostly. It arrives in the shape of repetitive tasks. You make coffee for 2, then pour half down the sink. You pass 2-for-1 deals at the store and keep walking. You relearn your own square footage. On Sundays, I drove to the farmer's market because we used to, and because habits have a gravity. The first time I went alone, the man who sold mushrooms raised an eyebrow. "She's missin' your face," he said. "She has other faces," I said lightly, and he took my cash without comment. I started running again. My lungs resented me for a week and then forgave me. I called my father, who offered one sentence: "I'm proud of you for not staying where you weren't wanted," and then asked about the socks like boys do when they're trying not to cry. I met friends I'd avoided while living in the urgent theater of a dying marriage. They hugged me. They lied. "You look great." 2 months in, I received a text from an unknown number. "How's freedom?" I ignored it. An hour later, "We should talk." The third message carried weight. A photo of a meeting invite. Liv and Marcus, together, scheduled with a procurement head at a competing brand. The subject line, Alternative Fast Track Program. I called Grace. "I thought you were done," she said. "So did I said. "But apparently the past is recyclable." "What do you want?" The answer surprised me in its clarity. "I want my life quiet, and I want them to stop mistaking getting away with it for a skill." She sighed, a sound like a woman setting down a heavy bag. "One last round," she said. Chapter 7. The Table Turns. Grace didn't need long. People who rise fast often keep the same speed when they lie. Marcus had formed a new LLC. Liv had moved personal funds around like chess pieces. The meetings were real, the pitch aggressive. Risk wasn't just moral now, it was legal. I didn't want prison, I wanted boundaries. We met in a small conference room at a neutral, forgettable hotel. Liv arrived in a cream suit that read as apology. Marcus arrived with the smile of a man who thought charisma could be notarized. I laid out my terms: stop the pitch, sever the financial ties, sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement, and return the money that had never been theirs to move. In exchange, I would keep the folder closed and the CEO off speed dial. Marcus laughed. "You think you have leverage." Liv didn't laugh. She watched me like she was finally seeing the math. "What if we say no?" she asked. "Then you change lawyers, and I change the temperature." He leaned forward, palms up. "Nathan, be reasonable." "I've been reasonable for a decade. Tonight, I'm specific." Liv touched his wrist. "We'll sign," she said. He turned to her, shocked. "Olivia!" She didn't look away from me. "We'll sign." And we did, in triplicate, with a notary who smelled like peppermint and regret. At the door, Liv paused. "Do you ever miss me?" she asked. "I do, every day, because it was the most accurate thing in the room." She nodded, and for a second, the version of us that might have been flickered across her face and was gone. Chapter 8. After. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of a long, loud alarm. Quiet returned in pieces. I kept the house and the cat and the blue door. I changed the lock, not as a message, but as a ritual. I painted the bedroom the color of a clear morning. I went to therapy and learned the boring miracle of telling the whole truth to someone who wouldn't use it against me. One evening in early spring, I set a table for one. Pasta with too much garlic, a glass of wine I didn't pretend to understand, and realized I was humming. Not happiness exactly, something gentler. Relief, maybe, or the first notes of a life with no witnesses required. Grace sent me a postcard from a beach that looked like a screensaver. On the back, she'd written, "You did the hard thing. That's the right thing more often than people admit. G." I didn't frame it. I put it in a drawer with the folder and the pen Liv had used to sign. Objects that had once felt like weapons softened into evidence of a story I had survived. Sometimes, when the street is quiet and the ivy throws shadows across the blue door like handwriting, I think about that dinner, about the way the lights dimmed and rose, about the way Liv's face didn't crack and then did. I don't replay it to feel powerful. I replay it to remember that I am allowed to walk away from a fire without carrying its heat forever. Epilogue. A year later, I saw Liv on a train platform. We made the same choice at the same time. We didn't approach. She looked well. I hope I did too. The train arrived noisy and indifferent. She boarded one car, I boarded another. As the city slid past the windows in streaks of light, I caught my reflection. A man older by a marriage and younger by a burden. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of distance being made without drama. It was the kindest sound I had heard in years. I texted Grace, "It's quiet." She replied, "Good, keep it." I put my phone away and watched the stations come and go, each one a possible stop I didn't have to take.